Hey, episode 99 of the Nashville Artist podcast is now out, featuring the incredibly talented Barbee. In this engaging conversation, BJ delves into his life as a multifaceted artist, tracing his journey from punk band drummer to accomplished visual creator. His work is shaped by diverse influences from the raw energy of punk rock and the lyrical melancholy of Randy Newman, to the haunting visual worlds of Francis Bacon and Robert Motherwell. BJ's creative process is spontaneous yet deeply reflective, with an emphasis on producing honest and spiritually resonant work, despite facing major challenges including a life-altering back injury. He continues to nurture his artistic passion through painting, music, and exploration across mediums. This episode also highlights his belief in the interconnectedness of all artistic expression, the importance of community, and the discipline needed to stay true to one's creative voice. BJ's advice to aspiring artists is simple but powerful. Create what feels true and let joy guide the work. Enjoy the podcast episode. What have you been up to today, or what did you do before this?
Today I kind of took it easy. I've been in my studio. I've got a show May 10th that I'm getting ready for. So I've just been in my studio working like a madman. And so today, since we were meeting up, I just decided to kind of not go into the studio, take the day, and I took the dog on a run. Had a pretty chill morning. It was good. Beautiful day.
Where did you run in?
We just ran around Shelby Bottoms, just around the loop. Just went and took her. She gets a little stir crazy. I got a little pit bull. She's gotta get out, stretch it every day, or she goes a little nuts. She gets very depressed.
Really?
So yeah, took her out. But a lot of times I really love trail running.
Nice.
I go out to Percy Warner, Beeman,
How many
Fontenelle.
miles did y'all do to this?
It's probably about 3.
Nice.
Pretty chill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that your main way of working out?
Yeah, I had a really bad accident some years back in 2016 and shattered my back in 3 places and wasn't supposed to walk again or anything. So that kind of changed the way I was able to work out. But because I was told that I wouldn't walk again, I got into running.
You're like, Russ, you have to tell me I can't.
I kind of have a little bit of an
Got against it.
antagonistic attitude when it comes to stuff like that. So if someone tells you can't do that, my sensibility is to do that thing immediately. So
That's awesome.
yeah, I don't, we went out to Shelby, but I usually don't run on flat concrete as much because of my nerves.
It's a banging,
Yeah. But if of trails and the terrain changing, yeah, I can rock that shit.
It's way better for your ankles.
It is, yeah.
'Cause you get the
I think it's
full-
better for your brain.
Yeah.
You just stay engaged. And, I think about how sick I was after that accident, which is around the time I got her. And she kind of kept me sane and made me actually not forget how to use my body for a long time. I owe that little pup a lot.
What's her
It's the
name?
best. Penelope.
Penelope. That's beautiful.
Little Penelope.
If you don't mind me asking, how did you shatter your back?
I was actually on a job site that I was running and went by at like 10 p.m. because I'd heard there was a fixture that wasn't coming down very easily. And I went by and jumped up on this ladder rig that had been up for a week, checked it before I went on. I've lived a lot of my life on ladders, and it was good. And I worked for like 2 hours, and I'm probably around midnight, the thing just shifted a little bit. It was a couple ladders with walk boards. It just kind of shifted and shot me off of it. And I fell about 17 feet onto my head on concrete, like straight on my head. You want to talk about a surreal experience. It took about an hour to hit the ground. It was crazy. Time just slowed down. It was pretty psychedelic.
It didn't knock you out?
I'm sure it did. I stayed pretty lucid through the whole thing. I laid on the ground for a long time and thought I was dying. I kept thinking the lights were going to go out, and then they just didn't. And I felt kind of embarrassed. It was like, oh, I died like falling off a ladder. Not that there's anything dishonorable about that, but I'm glad that didn't happen. And it took forever. I just remember this dust going in and out of my mouth, and I couldn't move to get the dust out of my mouth. And I just laid on this concrete floor, just like prone for a long time. And eventually my finger started to twitch. And I was like, all right, I'm back in business. It took a while.
Some blood all over the floor.
It wasn't that bloody. I had a huge contusion on my head, of course, and had a brain injury, but just absolutely shattered my back. But I got so filled with adrenaline that I got up and put the ladders back up and everything. I don't remember a lot of that, but I was there through the whole thing. I was very aware until I think like I was just in so much pain. And I was up walking around with a broken back. It was a pretty humbling experience. And definitely the start, that was like a major life shift. Going through something like that was wild.
Like, you call for help, or there anyone find you, or?
It was in a business, a bar that was closed down for renovations. So I was like, and it was about to be the weekend, and no one came in on the weekends while there was work being done. They would come in to do orders and stuff through the week. So I was like, I'm going to lay here on this floor for 48 hours at least before someone finds me, which was a good motivator for getting up. And once I kind of regained the use of my arms, I could tell something was wrong. And I was like, okay, I definitely broke my back, maybe not my neck. I thought I broke my neck first. And I felt for my phone, and it wasn't in my pocket. It had shot out of my pocket when I hit the ground. And I started looking around for that. And it's about 15, 20 feet away from me. It's just like, so I was like, I don't know if that thing's going to work, but I have to get that thing and get my ass out of here, So I tried to stand up, and it sounded like broomsticks breaking. It was so loud. And that's when like the 3 vertebrae just completely burst. And I drugged myself over and got that phone and called my girlfriend at the time. She was working at a bar. And she said she usually wouldn't answer when she was on the job. She was like, oh, I knew something was wrong because you were calling me at such a weird time, knowing I was at work. So she answered, and she said, the only thing I said was like, well, I finally did it. And that was kind of it. She tracked me down. She didn't know where I was, and knew I was working on that job. So she left work, and she found me, and my sisters and her and a couple other folks called an ambulance. And yeah, it was a wild thing. I held on to sanity for as long as I could that night. And then I kind of finally checked out. Yeah. It was, it was a pretty amazing experience. I've had a lot of wild kind of death-defying moments like that. And it really, it's not stuff I would wish on anyone, but going through it yourself, I have such an appreciation for having had the chance to see something from that particular angle. It's cool.
Awesome. Well, on that note, we'll get started. Yeah, everyone's going. Welcome to the Nashville Artist. I'm Jordan, and today BJ Barbee's.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, good to be here.
Awesome.
I've enjoyed our talk so far.
Awesome. Well, so where are you from?
I grew up in Sevierville, Tennessee. It's at the bottom of the Smokies. Born outside of Chattanooga. Grew up in Sevierville.
All right. I'm from Lookout Mountain, Georgia.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
So we're not too far away from.
Yeah, excellent. I grew up in the woods. When I was a kid, I thought that was the worst.
Yeah.
And I thought I was bored. It's like now looking back, it's like, what a fairy tale. It's just idyllic, like running around the Smokies as a kid, just by yourself. It's like, God, I'd give anything if that was my life now.
Yeah. And you said you have siblings.
Yeah, there's 6 of us. I'm number 2 of 6.
What are their names?
My big brother is Andrew. And then there's me. Then there's my brother John, my sister Evan, my brother Peter, and my sister Emily.
Wow.
And we're a pretty tight-knit group.
Were they also into art and music and stuff?
Every one of them in their own way. Yeah. I mean, I'm the one who kind of has pushed into visual art more than anyone, but my brother Peter is a pretty accomplished musician. He's a badass. But then each person has their own thing and is working in some creative field. My dad was a dentist, and my mom was an opera singer when she was younger, before she had a family. And so we kind of all got that right brain push from her. So it was cool.
I mean, you got that analytic side from your dad.
Yeah. I'm definitely a lot like my dad. Very, very interior in a lot of ways.
That's awesome. What were their names?
Richard and Dorian. Dick and Doe. Yeah.
And what kind of music did they like offer?
My mom was she was extremely varied. And then my dad, he loved the Beatles, of course. And then once I started touring in punk bands and stuff, he started telling me how much he loved Jethro Tull. I never would have seen that coming. It's weird kind of flute prog, sort of thing. And then after he passed, he would never let me go through his records for some reason. It was pretty interesting. He kept that to himself. But I found like weird punk records and stuff I wouldn't have expected. He was really into Mink DeVille. And it's like, God, we could have been talking about this shit the whole time. I had no clue.
I'm guessing he was more reserved.
Yeah, extremely. I mean, he kept to himself and was pretty quiet, whereas my mom was just very gregarious and in the middle of everything. She just wanted to be in the kitchen, surrounded by people, talking loudly all the time. And I think they gave each other a lot of balance. But I can look at my siblings and myself and see that we definitely got the best and the worst of both of them,
Yeah.
That's how it works.
So your mom liked to host or like have friends over?
Yeah, she was just so social and very attentive and loving, hugging everyone. And my dad kind of stayed in the back a little bit.
Welcome, son.
Yeah, you get a handshake. My entire life, I mean, his hugs were the one-armed hug, whereas my mom would just kind of melt on you. And so it was interesting growing up with, this, I wouldn't exactly call them polar opposites, but they definitely weren't very alike either. They had their own ways of expressing themselves.
Would you say you're more like touchy-feely, physical embrace type person?
I was a lot more so, and then breaking my back and going through all that kind of made me a little more reserved. And I was a very social animal my entire life. I was a pretty shy kid, and then got into drinking pretty young. I became a wild animal for a lot of years, and then broke my back and started to really appreciate time by myself. And you and I kind of were discussing earlier the kind of need to be by yourself and get some work done. And I find that's kind of where I sit more these days. So I definitely spent a lot of time being very, very loving and affectionate. And I still am, but I'm a little more chill.
Nice.
And off to myself.
So what were you like as a little kid? What were you into?
I was a pretty nerdy little kid, and I stayed indoors a lot as much as I could. And I kind of got into comic books And, I grew up in such a beautiful place and but I stayed inside drawing a lot. And I kind of kept to myself. And then I got into records. And once I started listening to so much music and went from comic books to collecting vinyl pretty young, and that kind of opened me up. And I was like, it was kind of off to the races. And I started to want to get out and see music being performed, meet people, figure my own ass out,
Do you remember your first record you got?
This'll date me. The first thing I bought with my own money was REM Automatic for the People. I bought it on tape at Kmart. That was the first thing I ever bought. And then the second was Creedence Clearwater Revival. I got a CCR on compact disc, and that changed everything. I started to like kind of older music. Then I got into punk, a lot of old punk records. My uncle gave me Ramones' Rocket to Russia on cassette, and I took a Greyhound bus from Knoxville to Memphis and listened to Rocket to Russia for like a 15-hour bus ride, just start to finish, over and over again. And that just burned itself into my brain. And that kind of dictated my tastes from there on out.
Wow. So what you said you got into music, how old were you when you were into that?
My uncle, who is a wild person, he kind of took me on as a project when I was a kid. And he gave me Bitches Brew, Miles Davis, and I didn't know what to make of that, but I just listened to it over and over and over again. And that opened me up to sound outside of what you were going to hear on the radio. Definitely being able to express yourself outside of, I guess, what would be seen as societal norms, because that was just, that's a brain record. See, yeah, I mean, I just kind of will cook your noodle. And so I started to really get into jazz, and I was into a bunch of punk stuff pretty young. And then I got into metal and prog rock stuff. I mean, when I heard King Crimson, that was like In the Wake of Poseidon was the record that when I heard that, I was just like, it was like the clouds parted. There was something so scary about it. So amazing. And then Lark's Tongue and Aspic, I really loved. And, Court of the Crimson King is just the classic. So that's when I was like, oh, there's like something almost kind of scary about music. And that's when I started to realize that musically the veil is very thin. And I started to get into kind of some of the darker side of music, like darker expression, and see spirituality and music outside of gospel music. I was raised like extremely religious, but it was like, oh, there's metal and there's stuff that's on the nose, a little more troublesome. But then there's this other stuff that's like, you kind of are dipping your toes into a weird pool. And I started to really get into more outsider kind of records,
Like outsider records or?
Well, I mean, being into music, there's bands like Suicide or something like that. And there's before Suicide and after Suicide. Like listening to Alan Vega and Martin Rev. They're these bands that I feel like really touched on something different. They like almost kind of a little bit of a metaphysical thing. Like a lot of German bands, krautrock bands, people go straight to Kraftwerk and Can and stuff like that. But a lot of the Mobius and Cluster records and all the Connie Plank produced stuff. I mean, there was a really cool kind of spiritual feeling to a lot of the krautrock stuff.
And esoteric.
Yeah, big time. Yeah. Just, something very three-dimensional. So being the kind of kid I was, I started to hang out in record stores and explore. I was really drawn into the visuals of album covers. That's now you can listen to anything, just about. You can still stump Spotify pretty easy. There's a lot of records that aren't on there. You go down YouTube and if it was put out, you can find some kind of digital record of it. When I was a kid, that wasn't the case. And so you were just soaking in whatever came your way. And if you heard about something, you didn't have the option of just going and listening to it immediately. And so you had to really search it out. And so I was like eating up the way these album covers made me feel, and then buying that with what little money I had as a kid, and going home and it being something completely different than what I expected, and hating it, but then not being able to stop playing it over and over again, and realizing I was like starting to love something I didn't expect to love. And so it's a cool thing. I feel like that doesn't necessarily happen in the same way. I'm like,
You're overwhelmed now. It's like you
got too many options,
you kind of lose the creativity of like searching it out, or
Nothing is precious now
it's too
in the
in your
way that
face.
it really was. And I feel fortunate to have grown up as a kid having to like look for buried treasure all the time. I love that it's like life tells you no all the time. Like, I wonder what all this is about. It's like, well, if it wasn't around you, you weren't going to see it or hear it. You had to go really looking for it, which took me to a lot of cool places. When I moved to New York, I mean, so much of that was because I grew up listening to Richard Hell and Television, and the Ramones and the Dictators and bands like that, and kind of knowing those stories, like reading Please Kill Me. I don't know if you've ever read that book. Absolutely amazing. But when you're a young kid, there are two authors. I can't remember the woman's name. Forgive me for that. But Legs McNeil, who he and John Holstrom started Punk Magazine. And it's essentially a book that chronicles punk rock. Starts kind of with the Velvet Underground in the 60s, and then ends with the death of Jerry Nolan. And why am I blanking on the guitarist's name of the New York Dolls? That hit on the head, Johnny Thunders, goes to their deaths. And it's all just quotes from people. And it tells essentially the arc of like punk rock and how that happened. And so when I moved to New York, I kind of wanted to experience a little bit of that rougher side of life.
Yeah.
And I got you. Yeah.
What was one of the roughest things you experienced in New York?
Oh man, I don't know. I'm not gonna get into that. Yeah, some of that. It was it was an education in itself. I moved to New York I was originally going to go to Hunter College and get my master's. And I had applied to that. And then I went up for a visit and ran around town for a couple weeks. And I was just like, oh, I'm coming here, but I'm not going to school. I just decided, I was like, I'm going to come here and I'm going to explore and kind of see all the things that I've never been able to see. Growing up as a kid out in the woods, and then moving to New York, which is just an unbelievable, you're 24 hours a day. It feels like you're hooked up to a car battery there. There's a low grade electrocution to living in that city that keeps you pretty motivated. And I ran around in some pretty tough circles. Got into a lot of music while I was there, and played in a bunch of bands, and got to see kind of, I don't know. I mean, even my friends that lived there were like, you were lucky. You got to see sort of the end of New York. I kind of the last gasp before it really took a turn and kind of incorporated itself and became a suburb. What's happening in Nashville? It's just happening everywhere.
What time period was this? What years?
I moved up there shortly after 9/11, and I was there for about a decade and then moved here.
Wow.
I fully moved up in New York in 2003 or 2004. But for a couple years, I was on tour a lot. So I was like back to back, and I was spending a lot of time in New York and finishing art school at the same time. So if I wasn't in school or on the road, I was in New York hanging. And it became sort of second home even before I lived there.
Wow. What you were talking about dark feelings about New York at the time. What was it like in 2003 in New York post 9/11?
I I think it's just that a big city is you don't have the ability to avoid human interaction. If you leave your house, you will be surrounded by people, and you will see people love each other, and you will see acts of shocking violence, or you will deal with people where they're at. In a peaceful place or a place of mental illness and addiction, you kind of have to take it as it comes. And I really appreciated that. And in a lot of ways, I went to school, I went to college, but my education was really touring and living in that town for a decade. That was that was where my education happened in life. When you take a step back and look at it, like that in itself is like more important than any kind of piece of paper or having gotten a degree. Like life doesn't give you a degree. And you get better at being in the flow of things, being inside of the meat grinder and continuing to exist. And that really, a lot of the sensibility of the way I approach art and music comes from that. It's like the immediacy and the act of survival. There's something so triumphant in weathering really intense storms and being able to write about that or create some kind of visual tether to these pretty insane experiences you get to go through in life. I feel really fortunate to have lived the way I've lived and survived the things I've seen. And it's not like my life has been all bad, but I've definitely gotten to see the spectrum of human existence. And it's fascinating. It's really cool.
Wow. Yeah. I still need to go to New York, but from what I've heard, everyone's like, yeah, you go on the subway and people are just crying in public or just like everything is just like no one cares in New York. No one gives a shit at all.
No, you can be surrounded by thousands of people and be completely invisible. Absolute anonymity, even though there are no walls between you and anyone else.
I'm guessing celebrities don't really deal with hecklers.
Nobody cares. There's, and this is not to be some commercial for New York, but at the same time, it's just a very different environment there. Here we're in cars and we try to get the closest parking space we can get, do the least walking. Where there, you're just covered in brake dust and rat shit, and you're walking through gray snow for a good portion of the year. And you're dealing with people being fed up with their situation. And you yourself just, it makes you a little harder. And it's pretty enlightening.
Wow.
Yeah. So this is definitely not some billboard to go be a tourist there, but I have a lot of appreciation for that town and Nashville as well. Living here, like this is its own strange entity as well. Nashville energetically is such a bizarre town.
Really?
Yeah.
In what way? Since you've lived in New York?
I think just like the level of creativity here a lot of things have become so commodified in this town, and people are a little scared of what doesn't sell. But then on the fringe of Nashville as a whole, you've got this really bizarre kind of life form that's always at work. And I remember hearing, like, my buddy Richie Kirkpatrick, hearing Ghost Finger when I lived in New York, and then meeting him there, even though we were both from Tennessee, and like I was like, oh, bands are like this in Nashville. And then meeting Villa, the Matoid, I don't know if you know who he is. I was like, oh, there's some really wild outsider shit going on in Nashville. And there still is in spades here. But you kind of have to go looking for it, you know? Yeah, Nashville's a cool town. It's a bunch of musical cyborgs that can do anything.
Yeah.
You get kind of spoiled being in a town like this, especially if you play music, because it's like, it really is wild, the people that you get to work with.
Like 1 in every 4 people here is creative in some way, shape, or form. Even if they don't make it their profession, they could probably still are creative, an instrument or something.
Absolutely.
And like, I always tell people, if you move here and live here, even if you're not a musician, you become a better musician, just because your exposure to the people, to every bar and like every place in this town is like got a band that's usually playing in it, and they're probably pretty good because they had to fight to get to that spot.
There's a competitive thing here,
Like,
you know?
pushes everyone to like
Yeah.
at their highest level.
Mhm.
Whereas you go to like certain towns where you can like my people are like, it might be Bill's first or second gig and he's drunk and his buddies are just having fun, and we're all at the mercy of how well they're going to play.
Yeah.
Whereas here, everyone's like on their shit, like they want to be good.
And I really appreciate that,
Me
you
too.
know? I mean, it's definitely the difference in the two towns. Like, you would see weirder shit in New York more often than you would in
There's more
Nashville.
people.
Because they're just, yeah, there's more opportunity to see it, because it's just such a, you know, it's a microcosm unto itself. But when you do see something really wild here, it's always pretty astounding. And over the years, I've gotten to see so much music and experience a lot of stuff. But some of the most transcendent moments have been in little clubs and being enacted by friends of mine. It's like, whoa, like, there are a lot of lightning rods
Yeah.
in this town. It's cool.
So going back to like when you first started playing music and doing art and stuff, what was your first instrument, or what was your first creative path?
I was given a guitar really young, but I would plunk around on that and didn't really connect with it. And then I started to think about drums. And when I was a kid, I would tap on things and realize it's like, oh, I can play straight. It's like, actually, I'm like, my hands are pretty fast. And I would beg for a drum set or something, and for years, like, nothing. And I grew up on this little river in East Tennessee, and it would flood pretty often. And so 5-gallon buckets and propane tanks, empty propane tanks, all the shit would wash on shore. And I would go pick up all this trash, and I essentially created this wall of junk that I turned into a drum set. And I would whittle sticks, and I taught myself to play drums in this kind of garage chicken coop thing. Just had like real dusty dirt everywhere. And I created this makeshift drum kit and got so good at it that my uncle, I was saying, the real wild dude, Bill, he's like, you got to buy him a drum set, to my parents, and they would not relent. And so he bought a drum set for me and drove from Memphis to Sevierville broke into our house when he knew my family. He came on a Sunday morning, knowing my parents were going to take all of us to church. And he broke into the house and put the drums in, he set them up in the living room of our house. So we get home. My parents open the door. There's a window busted out. They're like, oh no, someone broken out. Open the door. And I see those drums. And I was like, it's finally happened. Like they bought me these drums. I can't believe it. And they were just horrified. I was like, no. But once they were in there, they were kind enough to let them stay. And that did it for me. That was kind of the real beginning. So that crazy bastard just, he made that happen.
How did y'all later find out it was Uncle Bill that?
Oh, he took credit for it pretty quick.
Was he there waiting for you?
No, he took off. He drove. Literally, he probably was drunk when he did this, and he did this, and then he left and drove straight back to Memphis, and that was
Literally broke into hell.
that was such a good deed, though, in a lot of ways. Maybe he did me a favor, or maybe I would have gone a totally different way, but I'm stoked about the way things turned out. And that was him doing that. What a selfless act.
And one day you'll get to return the favor to one of your nephews.
Yeah. I mean, hopefully my nieces and nephews, like they've all got their thing they're into. I mean, I had a nephew that wanted to play drums, but he kind of lost interest, but he moved on to stuff he really digs doing, which is making moonshine.
Wow, that's cool.
Turns out that's what he likes doing.
How old is he?
And he's 22 now, 22 or 23.
Went straight for the moonshine.
Yeah, he had a knack for it. He's really good at it. And now that it's not illegal to do, gone into business.
Does he flavor it and everything else too?
Yeah, you can do just about anything. I mean, I don't drink anymore, and I'm a little sad I'm not gonna test his wares. Never say never. One day at a time. But yeah. He's cool.
What's his name?
William.
William.
I got 6
William the
nieces and
moonshine
nephews, and I'm a good uncle. I hope. I enjoy being an uncle.
That's awesome. So when you got the drums, what other drummers or who were you really influenced by?
I mean, I really loved Elvin Jones and Jack DeJohnette from listening to Miles Davis. And then once I got into King Crimson and stuff like that, Bill Bruford and Michael Giles, like they're just both unbelievable. And I see your Tower of Power album over here. So Garibaldi, I really love. Lenny Williams. I got really into the meters when I was a kid. So Zigaboo, I really loved him. And Bigfoot Braley out of Parliament and all that. I still play drums, but it's the thing I do the least now. I pick up gigs from time to time. That definitely, out of everything, is the first thing I really fell in love with. Like, in this lifetime, music and translating that has been kind of a romance in my life, like something I felt like deeply connected to and have a lot of love for.
It's awesome. How old were you when you got that drum set?
I was 15. From about the time I was 11 to 15, I was beating on buckets.
Did you play at school or anything?
Once I got that drum set, I joined a band immediately, and I was really into Helmet, so John Stanier, I loved him and got to meet him because the band I was in at the time opened up for Tomahawk. And so I got to meet Stanier, who was, you want to talk about a weird, cool, very shy guy who at the time didn't really want to talk to anybody. And it just the mystery of that made me just love the guy more. It was just like, he was nice, but he was a little standoffish at the time. And I was just like, man, made me really like him more, like not getting to talk to the guy created more of a sense of mystery. So I started playing in bands like that, heavy bands immediately. And then I got into band in kind of community college. But then a guy who came to one of those performances was like, I bet you can play really fast. And I was like, yeah, I can. And he was like, I need a fast drummer. And then that was it. I started a band with this guy. It was this wild punk band called the American Plague. And we essentially just went out on the road immediately. And I got to tour and play with a bunch of my idols growing up, like playing with the Misfits and stuff like that.
Get to play with the Misfits?
Oh, yeah. It was Michael Graves'
Like
era.
in the
Misfit.
band? Or
No, we were opening for them. But their drummer, who was back with them at the time, was Dr. Chud. It was great watching those guys every night.
Got to meet Doyle.
Yeah. Doyle and
He's
Jerry
really
were,
charming.
yeah, they're all like unbelievably sweet, dude. Yeah. It was so funny because while we were playing with them, they just hung outside of their little bus and lifted weights listening to Janis Joplin every day. Them just spotting and manic panicking their hair and doing the devil lock before they'd go on. But they would just lift weights and spot each other with this like shitty weight bench and just listen to Big Brother and the Holding Company. It was, at the time, that was like the thing they were just listening to over and over again and bumming cigarettes off us kids,
Yeah. I mean, he can weights and also smoke.
Yeah.
Even Doyle.
Absolutely. As I remember. Yeah. Yeah. They were really, really cool guys. It was a lot of fun. So that led to touring, and for a long time I played drums on the road and did a lot of that. And then I kind of started singing sort of as a joke, and it turned out I was really good at that. And that was kind of a sea change. And ever since then, I've sang in bands and got into playing guitar and can do that well enough to get the job done. Kind of thing.
How old were you when you started singing?
I was probably 22 or 23, and then didn't do that for years. Through most of New York, I was playing drums, and then kind of at the end of my living in New York, started a band where I was singing, and it went really well. Like, we started to really kick, but then I essentially I left New York because I had a lot of drug problems. I understand, but I was like, I gotta escape this place or I'm not gonna make it out.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Earlier in your influences were like punk bands, early jazz, or acid jazz. And
a lot of funk stuff. I mean, I didn't, I was really obsessed with like Nigerian pop and stuff like that. Like we were talking about a lot of Afrobeat and kind of juju music and the soukous guitar stuff. So, my interest in drums, of course, the hand drumming, like Tony Allen from Ghana and stuff like that. I was just really blown away by that. So, yeah. And then moving to New York, where you essentially see all those bands, see that many influences over the course of a couple weeks. You can go to a show, everything, and see it. Like I was telling you earlier, I got to somehow by accident sit in with Fela Kuti's band. And I don't have a background in African drumming or really understand a lot of that stuff deeply on a technical level. But to sit in with a group of people that no matter what you do, they envelop you. And you are just drugged into a musical situation. That was a really cool thing to experience. Yeah.
Wow. What would you say is like one of these things you learn? The art scene and music in New York.
It's an oddly tight-knit kind of scene. People all know each other and they watch each other. They watch each other's backs there and help each other a lot. Nashville has that to a certain extent, but Nashville is also, like we said, it's got that competitive spirit. New York oddly has a much more accepting thing. I think life is just harder there. It's more expensive. Everybody, just to have a rehearsal space is such a pain in the ass there and is a real endeavor to have. So there, I really enjoyed the networking aspect and kind of the selfless attitude that a lot of people had there. If they liked what you were doing, they told everyone, and you would meet people so quickly because there's very much kind of a very tribal feeling in New York. They're like, you watch The Warriors or something like that. It really kind of is that socially, in that people group together and these groups all kind of start mixing and you start meeting people so quickly. And before you know it, you're playing with people that you idolized as a kid. And it was a cool situation. So that's something I learned there that I've appreciated over the years, because I definitely have such an appreciation for my friends and what they're able to do. I think in a lot of ways, being an artist is like being a wizard. You're just doing magic tricks.
Conjuring and creating.
It really is. Whether you write or not, I notice it a lot when I write music. It's not really something I feel you are doing. I think it's something that's being lent to you. You're getting to borrow this thing. When you're in a flow, there is a current that is washing around you. And if you're perceptive of enough, you grab the fish out of the stream. And that's the way you kind of keep yourself alive artistically. And I really do feel that that is how it works. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
It really is wizardry.
Yeah. Man, going back to the Warriors, I remember when I rented that, or I got it from some crazy movie store because I played the video game. And I remember when I convinced my mom to take me to this movie store, which was like 45 minutes away. I got this movie and then came home, and I was in 7th grade, and my dad came home from work and wanted to hang out or watch. And I was like, Dad, I can watch this with you. I have to watch it by myself. And I know it's going to be
amazing. Good for you.
I know it's going to be rated R, and you're going to be upset by the language or whatever. I'm like, I can't have that. So I had to wait for my dad to
respect, man. Yeah.
And then I put the movie on, and I became
into the zone.
I was like, I want to be Ajax. I want to be Swan. I want to be a mixture of these guys. I every single, if I had to use a restroom, paused it, went back, used the restroom, then rolled it back.
Yeah, the rewind, so you can actually
I was so into this movie. These characters and the video game captivated me so much. I was like, I have to know where this came from. And when I first watched it, I was like, I can't have anyone else run by myself.
That's the feeling I had when I read that book, Please Kill Me. Because it is essentially the true story of that. And it's not gangs, but, music at that point in the 70s was a lot like, kind of gang activity in a lot of ways. It was a different world. It was a little more dangerous, and you were a little more exposed. And so these bands and the way music built on itself was so amazing. And yeah, that's the way I felt when I read that book. And I was like, I have to go see this.
The camaraderie and just we got each other's backs. We're in this together. It's military, but it's also we're brotherhood. It changed, you know what the movie is based off of, right?
I'm not sure if I do.
The Odyssey.
Oh.
That's why his name is Ajax.
Makes total sense, yeah.
There are different names. They're trying to get back to,
really, yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah, so it's based off the Odyssey.
Okay.
But yeah, that movie changed my life.
Yeah. Same. I mean, I knew that it was a very hyper real thing when I saw it, but I was like, this is kind of what I want. I want to be part of a crew that like watches out for each other and can get through anything.
Yeah.
And, I've been fortunate to have a group of friends that I've had for decades at this point. It really is kind of like that. Like we've been through a lot and we're still kind of family. Art imitates life and life imitates art.
Definitely. Okay. Yeah.
Socially and politically, but just taste wise, the
It
aesthetics
was a
of it.
whole like 1980s like, Motley Crue of like
Girl, sex, and drugs.
cause that
Great, buddy.
yeah, it doesn't really today or
I'm going to use everyone around.
yeah. I want to do the guy's cocaine and then act like I don't know where it is and try and help him find it.
That goes hand in hand.
Yeah. Yeah. Why is all the cocaine?
Tommy Lee, Methods of Mayhem. God, I have not thought about that in forever.
I remember watching like, the movie Indian in the Cupboard.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Like when they were staying up late, they're like watching like MTV music videos and like Motley Crue comes on and it's girls, and it's just like, I remember just like being so young and watching them be like, why are they watch? What is this? And that was like my introduction to Molly from them.
Yeah. 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 VH1 Behind the Music when I was a kid and that stuff started coming out. Or I guess it had been out, but I was hooked. I didn't know it all.
Right. I went down this similar insane obsession. I even have the autobiography next to my bed of Al Jordanson from Ministry.
Yeah, Ministry.
Dude, it's now one of my favorite bands because it's just like, this guy is so insane.
Have you read Mark Lanigan, Sing Backwards and Weep?
No, but I know about Mark Lanigan, how he used to do heroin with Al.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like crazy how Al was still alive.
Mark was the tough one.
Really?
The two of them.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
There's this crazy ass story of where like, what's that party with Al? Or like we were going to bar.
Mm-hmm.
The one time I couldn't like keep up with him because he was like such a wild alcoholic, whatever. And I had heard stories of how insane he was. Then one time I threw up in the parking lot and I was like throwing up a lot. Then Al comes up behind me, scoops up my throat, eats it, and then goes to the next bar.
Like the Aussie snorting ants thing,
Like Al, like back in high school, used to shoot cocaine and then go to baseball practice. And he was like the all-star player.
Yeah. Wow. You start shooting speed, you'll play some baseball.
And he said,
you'll keep your eye on the ball.
He was like, all the jocks didn't like me because they knew I did drugs. And none of the other players liked me.
Nolan was going to outrun.
Yeah, exactly. I was the best player on the teams. Yeah. It's like, you started off shooting cocaine and God. And you're like, that's how you, he's like, I thought.
It's hard to go backwards.
Yeah, I was like, I thought needles were normal because my friend's mom would saw her inject herself all the time.
Yeah.
I was like, how can you start?
You just don't know any better. Life presents itself to you in its own rhythm.
Yeah. And he's like, then they put me in an insane ward and I learned how to eat out women. I would go to all the nymphomaniac women and have all this insane stuff.
Yeah.
And he's like, I love being in the psych ward because they gave you drugs and like I could just have endless sex.
Yeah. Jurgensen's a weird character. I definitely resonate more with Lanigan. I loved that guy.
What makes him so insane? Or like, what is insane? I know a little bit about him, but not as much as Al.
I was on a tour one time, and my buddy Zach put on Field Song by Mark Lanigan. It was one of his solo albums, and I had heard Screaming Trees when I was a kid, and then, of course, heard him sing on Songs for the Deaf and stuff like that. So I knew who he was. But I hadn't gotten into his solo stuff, and that kind of kicked doors open on a lot of material that I hadn't heard. Zach and I were driving a van full of gear in the middle of the night, and he put that on, and I was just like, oh, shit, this is amazing. And had no clue that the guy had a solo career. in a way.
I don't know either.
Oh man, it's unbelievable. Huge amount of work, mountain of albums and collaborations and stuff. Really amazing. And that guy's voice, man, that's just like burnt rubber. So amazing. Like people have some people really earn their voices,
Through the hardship.
That guy had an unbelievably tough life, and you can hear it in the way he sang. It was not a character. It was very much who he was. And, some years back, he died a couple years ago, and my buddy Chris and I went to see him. I'd never seen him live, but got to see him play at Mercy Lounge shortly before he died, and he was real sick. He looked like this strong, weird kind of, there was something very monkey, tough about him, just a little other, He's such a cool, weird character. And so he seemed so strong, but then you watched him walk out on stage and you could tell he was in a lot of pain, and died shortly after that. But seeing that dude live was cool. I was really glad I got to actually see him before he passed. Very, there's certain people that carry a very spiritual air around them, and I definitely felt that around that guy. It was cool.
How would you say he was, just in case your hair does wipe it or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure, it's fine. How would you say he was really insane or crazy? What would...
Well, I've spent a lot of time. I've spent a lot of years having a lot of addiction stuff myself, and so I kind of resonate around addicts. And that dude was such a dope fiend. He was clean in his later years, but there's such a tenacity and kind of an understanding of suffering around some people. And that dude, there was a real deep empathy to that guy and the way he wrote and saw things. It was pretty amazing.
Apparently, Al Jordanson was with Kurt or Lane Staley when he first shot heroin, and Al said that Lane was not the guy who did heroin because he had a rough life, but because he just wanted to try it. And so he said he wasn't a real heroin addict.
Yeah.
Just a guy that got it because Al was shooting up and Lane wanted to try it, and Al was like, "Are you sure you want to do that?" And
Oh yeah, he's just on the ride.
yeah, and Lane was like, "Yeah, I went downhill from there."
I won't say his name, but a friend of mine years ago said something that I always found pretty powerful around drugs and booze and stuff like that, like any kind of addiction stuff. He's like, I don't do it because of the high. I do it because of the come down, like the really hard thing that you have to suffer through. Because he was like, that's the time I feel close to God, and is when I'm begging for help. And I was like, whoa, yeah. I mean, there's such a humanity to a statement like that, And my buddy said that just literally in passing, but that always really stuck with me.
So Eric Clapton, did heroin because he said it helped him write better blues music, helped him be more depressed.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody's got their reasons behind why they do things. And I think some people use it as a tool, but then there are some people that use it because of some kind of deep internal struggle within themselves. You're looking for answers. Do you know who Gabor Mate is? He's a Hungarian doctor. He's one of the leaders in the study of addiction, and his take on addiction is really amazing. It's just it's not a moral weakness. It's not about right and wrong. It's about self-preservation. And at any point, no matter what the drug is, that thing helped you at one point. Whether it was to come out of your shell or to give you some kind of strength to get through a hard situation. I was like, it really helped you, but it just doesn't help you forever. So he's like, you got to take away any sense of morality in the situation. And I have a lot of respect for that take on things.
Yeah.
I like how we're just like, we're in a tangential move.
Well, it's
Just going through
this
tangents.
is all part of the art. Like they say, like people who do heroin, it's because they have a deep anger they are trying to subdue.
Yeah.
Whereas other drugs, it's and not necessarily an anger thing, but with heroin, apparently it's an anger thing.
I could see that. I mean, for a very short time, messed around with that. And luckily, I kind of didn't get good at it, which is the way I see it. Like, I was into like a lot of more speedy kind of drugs. Yeah. And then I started to mess around with that so that I could sleep kind of thing. And I never got good at doing it. I think that kind of stayed fun ways. But yeah, I could see that. I think it quiet there are these things that quiet some kind of inner turmoil. You get a little break from it, and it creates a soft pillow for you for a short time, and then the chaos comes roaring back. Yeah. Hearing all the old rock star stories and stuff like that, I find it pretty fascinating. Then you get older, and it's like, I get it. We're all just kind of doing the best we can.
Coping with the reality of life. So we kind of already talked about this, but what initially drew you to painting, music, and art? What keeps you passionate about it?
I started drawing when I was a kid and was pretty good at it. And then, like I said, I then got into records, and there was something very spiritual about the way music made me feel. So it created this kind of through line of, I kind of see them as interchangeable. I get the same feeling whether I'm playing music or working on visual art, which I've done a lot of sculpture and different things like that, but I always go back to painting. I get the same charge, kind of electrical charge from doing either one. But, I got reconnected with visual art. I saw a Robert Motherwell painting, and it was one of the elegy paintings, Elegy of the Spanish Republic. And I stood in front of this huge abstract painting, which I had never had any interest in. I was probably like 19 or something. And I had what I understand is a pretty spiritual moment standing in front of this gigantic painting. It just blew my mind. There was something so monumental about it. And some people would see it as paint slopped on a canvas, but I saw it as like a transmission from another place. It was like, oh, this is like a vision. And some people see the vision and some people don't. And I felt lucky to stand in front of that painting and understand that this person had experienced this thing, and this was their way of telling me about it. So that feeling has never left me. And that's why I've kind of loved the visual arts and music my entire life. It's because you're lucky enough to witness a very kind of spiritual act. And you can be seeing a painting 50 years after it was made. And the fact that it can charge you, like kind of electrocute you in that way, that's like a powerful thing. And just how you can sit down and listen to a song and be completely overwhelmed by you can feel someone's pulse in it. And that's the way I feel about art in general, is we're essentially picking up these like transmissions from another place. And my understanding of heaven and hell, is you get to hear from both sides. And it's cool.
Like we need a book on Jesus, we need a book on Hitler. We need to understand both.
Yeah, I mean, any word or action is going to resonate with someone somewhere. And I think in you getting to make art, that is you putting your own stake in the ground, and in your small geographic place, you get to choose a direction, and we all are creating ripple effects around us. And maybe you are making something that a ton of people hear, and maybe there's just a couple people that hear it. But I know that I've had moments with, listening to a cassette tape a friend of mine made that I know no one else ever heard, but it changed something for me, It was like, whoa, I really felt like I picked up on some powerful message that then kind of dictated the way I did my own work.
Yeah. So how do you go about developing your artistic skills? Do you have like routines for your painting and music?
I do more now. In December, I was lucky enough to be accepted into this program downtown that's through the Downtown Presbyterian Church. I'm not affiliated with the church and don't find myself to be overly religious these days. I have a fascination and a connection to a lot of that stuff, but in practice. So it's interesting being in that environment. This church has opened up its doors to artists since the mid 90s, and they've got a couple floors of art studios. So I, tried to get one of those studios 15 years ago, and people just don't really leave them. And then a friend of mine, Sarah Landell Hart, she set me up and got me one of those. And since I've had that studio, I've started to have kind of a regular practice where I go in the morning and I keep office hours in my studio. I go in about 8:30 every morning, and I stay till 4 or 5. But up until then, it was kind of just flying by the seat of my pants. I used to only work when I was extremely drunk, and just be kind of out of my mind, or through doing a lot of psychedelics and being in a very different place, or kind of speed freaking my way through some artwork. And now it's different. It's a lot quieter, and it feels more like I'm doing business, which was something I felt like I avoided for a long time. And now I just have a real appreciation for it. It's like I like having a routine. And within these hours in the day, I respect very much that I go to a place, I sit there. If nothing happens and I don't get any work done, cool. If something does happen, it's because I sat there and waited for it to happen. And I usually get there and kind of busybody. But then just like this conversation, I get on a tangent. I just start moving, and next thing I know, I've made a bunch of shit that didn't exist before I went into that room that day. So that's a cool feeling. So yeah, I guess I have a practice. I still am not the most disciplined person. I would like to be a person that gets up at 5 a.m. and works out, but I've never been exactly that guy. But having this place has instilled in me finally a little desire for some structure.
So when you go there, what are the art activities that you do there? Mostly just painting, or do you do sculpture there as well, or?
Just painting for the most part. I've always worked out of my house, and now that I have a separate space, it's really dictated how I get things done and also why I get things done. And the way I make art, there's something very stylized and controlled, but it's a very physical activity for me. Not that I'm just flinging paint. Being an artist, there's just something about the way I build the canvases themselves and stuff that I get cut and bleeding, and I'm very much a
Part of the art.
yeah, oh, yeah.
The blood.
I mean, yeah, totally. I mean, I'm definitely have that happen. I've mixed some things into paints over the years, but there's a physicality to working that I really enjoy, and having that space has allowed me to kind of stretch out and have a little more control. I had an art show at my friend Julia Martin's gallery a couple of years ago, and by the end of that, making all the artwork in town, in my house, I had painted myself to where I was like standing in the bathtub. I had quite literally painted myself into a corner, and I don't want to live around that anymore. I like leaving a place.
Separating.
Yeah. And yeah, having some kind of geographic separation. Because I'll make a mess. And I enjoy the tactility of being able to fuck shit up a little bit. And,
Yeah.
It's nice to
And then we
close the door behind you.
leave the mess behind.
But having that spot, I clean up at the end of the day. And that's kind of my way of, I don't know, thanking myself for being there.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to come in tomorrow and have it be a total mess.
How big is your space?
They're a room this size. If this room was double this size, and then 2 of those rooms.
Oh, okay.
I've got 2 rooms. There's one side that I use to do the work, and the other side that I use
Storage or
where I've got essentially material set up, a couple bookcases, because I really love having a ton of books around when I make art, whether it's something I read or something I see. So I have a bunch of weird medical journals and esoteric books and photography books, just different things, a lot of poetry. I got a little nook in the corner with my chair, and I'll sit and read for a while, and it kind of sparks something. I think a lot of the way I make art is by ingesting art as well. I've spent a lot of my life watching movies, and I love film. And when I worked in New York, I was a set designer for a lot of years, and I worked in film, and then I went to fashion and built sets for Victoria's Secret for a long time. And so I was started in film, and then I went into kind of editorial stuff. That's a career have not had anything to do with in a long time, but I did that for about 7 or 8 years in New York. And that taught me so much about the way I frame things and the way I understand, and continuity, and the understanding of aesthetically projecting your idea and making it read.
Wow. Yeah, I bet your whole idea of space, leaving room and all that.
Like I can't just watch a movie anymore, though. I'm constantly the person that is looking for continuity cues, and like the glasses with the water and the cigarettes and the hair flipping back and forth and stuff like that, because that was something I had to watch on set working, especially when you're set decking. If they reset the shot, you've got to make sure everything was where it was at the beginning of the last time they shot it, so there's not stuff kind of traveling and growing legs kind of thing. So yeah, art and music, just your experience is always going to be your best teacher, and that taught me a lot. That was a degree unto itself. Yeah.
Can you walk us through your creative process from like conceptualization to final painting or music?
Yeah, they kind of happen the same way. I don't spend a lot of time planning, and I don't really sketch stuff out. I just have it in my head, the way it just kind of comes to me. Like, I think it does with a lot of people. Sometimes someone will sit down and really draft out an idea, and that's the way they work. Me, I just kind of have an idea, and I just know how it's got to get done. But I also don't draw super well, and I'm not a great draftsman. And so I just have to, I kind of have like an economy of time in my head, and was like, why would I spend all that time drawing it if that's not the thing? And so I just kind of start it. And so I just will have a random kind of idea for something, almost like having a vision, not like a religious experience necessarily, but I'll have this image pop into my head. And it's the same way with writing songs, like a lot of songs I'll finish the thing in 15, 20 minutes if I'm smart about it. I won't get up and try to change the subject. I'll sit with the thing. A lot of work I do, visual, or the stuff that turns out the best, is the stuff I do in the moment. when the feeling kind of strikes, if I stick with it, that's the stuff that always turns out the best. Because I really, there's something to giving yourself over to the gift you're being given. Yeah, yeah. I think anyone who messes with any kind of music, everybody's got an iPhone now, and everybody has 800 voice memos. And I have that, but the stuff that I've always been the proudest of is like when that started flowing, I took that opportunity to sit down and tell everything else no, so that I could see that through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. So you express yourself through painting, singing, and playing music. How would you say these inform each other in your art process or influence each other?
I think that we all just embody the thing we really love. And like I said earlier, I don't see those things as energetically being really any different. Like I get the same feeling from any of those. So I feel like everything I do is connected just because it's me. I'm like you. I'm kind of a busybody. Like you were saying, you always keep yourself busy when you're alone. And I'm the same. I'm a tinkerer. Like I have like 10 projects going on at all times. And in recent years, I keep to myself a lot more, and I'm not lonely at all. I have a ton of really great friends, and I have like a social life to a point, not like I used to, but I'm
Having a good time.
I'm always having a good time. Like I'm building some weird contraption, or I'm
Highly entertained.
totally. I mean, I have art that I do that I show people, but then I also have stuff that I realize I'm making solely for myself. Like I am making something that I don't plan on showing anyone. And it's not because it's some dark thing. It's just because it's like,
Feed your soul.
this is a puzzle I've created for myself. And I'm going to sit here and work on this puzzle. And I've taught myself so many things by just having that frame of mind.
Childlike curiosity.
I mean, I'm a collector of hobbies, and I've turned myself into a Swiss Army knife. I can do anything just because I've spent so much time kind of workbenching, everything. And I have a lot of fun figuring out things I don't know how to do yet.
What are some of the hobbies that I guess most people don't know about?
Like I spend a lot of time sewing because there's something very, very meditative about it. And so I don't know that a lot of people know how much I love to sew, but I also taught myself to, a lot of people in this town, of course, if you work on your own gear, know how to do it, but it's what got me into being able to wire my own shit, solder and stuff like that, they're the things I do outwardly, like painting, or mostly now singing and playing guitar. But then there are the other things behind it, and we all have just interests that fill out the rest of the equation.
Yeah.
There are a lot of things I like to do. Like I stay at home a lot, especially I became a little more reserved after I got hurt so bad and spent a lot of years being really sick. So I spent a lot of time cooking. I like doing that and running with my dog. My life is as complicated as it is when you step back. It's like, no, it's actually pretty simple. There are only so many moving parts.
Yeah. And you're at the core of them.
Yeah, we're all the center of our own universe. You're the main character in your play all the time. And
There's nothing you haven't experienced where you aren't the center of it. That's why it's so hard.
we're all these tiny universes bumping into each other.
Yeah.
It's just a big cosmic bumper car.
That's what we're doing now.
Totally.
The only way I find out
I've really enjoyed it.
about you is if I ask, get all it out of your mind.
Yeah. I will definitely sit around and talk. I love to conversate and get to know people, and pretty open book about stuff.
Oh, it's great to learn and just hear someone's experience,
Yeah.
how they perceive things.
human beings never cease to fascinate me.
Oh, yeah.
And I just have known some of the weirdest, coolest characters. It's like I have been fortunate to be surrounded by kind of cartoon characters and be one of them my entire life. Just like, whoa, the people I've known have been so off the wall and so completely their own thing, absolute individuals. And I love that.
Yeah.
And it's like you kind of, people talk about finding your tribe and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's true. I think energetically we're drawn to each other. And, you see something in that person that reminds you of yourself. You feel like a connection. And I think that in itself is one of the greatest gifts in life, just getting to know all the other weird bastards. We're
Bonding.
definitely, yeah, yeah.
Right. So is there a core emotional or thematic thread that runs through all your artistic expression?
I've always been drawn to the darker, sadder side of things. I don't think there's a singular theme that I work in, but I very much resonate kind of the struggle of being alive. And so a lot of my work will be a little darker in subject matter. It's not meant to be any kind of horrifying thing. I was the kid that listened to the sad songs rather than the happy songs. And so there's a theme of understanding loss and hardship in a lot of the stuff I make. And I feel that that's probably a way that I therapize myself too. I think when I go through periods of not working, I feel like I myself start to get a little sick. Like it can exhibit itself physically. And I've had periods where when I went through a couple of years of really low health after shattering my back, I couldn't work. And I think it made me kind of spiritually sick, like anemic. It weakened me. And so as I've in recent years kind of come back to life, like the act of doing these things is what kind of keeps me sane and healthy. So I think a lot of my work kind of probably deals with some kind of struggle of some sort and understanding where we kind of fit. There's triumph in it somewhere, but it always looks a little bleak.
You work through the travesty, you get to the triumph.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, life in itself is a catharsis, It's people suffer. And then you have that moment of elation where you have reached some kind of pinnacle of understanding that you had not been to yet. You had not had the pleasure of having that vantage point, So I have a lot of respect, and I feel like a lot of the stuff I make deals with that.
Nice. So I guess I could have asked this earlier, but of all time, where do you think your favorite artists are, musicians, bands?
I think my favorite artist, it's hard to pick. Like Robert Motherwell, when I saw that painting, and that really resonated with me. And Mark Rothko, I have very much the same feeling. But there's an artist named Fred Thomas, and I think his work, my stuff is nothing like his. You wouldn't put them together at all. But seeing his work, it kind of opened something in my brain in visual art. I was extremely inspired. And then music-wise, he gets kind of seen as like the Disney Pixar guy, but the most heartbreaking music I've ever heard was written by Randy Newman.
Oh, shit.
I
got a friend in here.
Oh man, I mean, you really get into his catalog, and I think he's one of the greatest American songwriters to ever live. I mean, his stuff is unbelievably heartbreaking.
Yeah.
But he gets kind of seen as like this cartoon character, and people don't really go deeply into his catalog, I mean, when I was younger, I heard a lot of stuff. I heard Sail Away, which has so many songs on it that just really broke my heart. I couldn't believe how sad that album was. And I was a kid, and then I heard Leonard Cohen, and I was like, oh, there are people that write about this kind of tragedy. And I was a really depressed little kid. My mom said at one point, she was like, I had never seen such a sad 5-year-old. And I think that's just the way I was wired. It wasn't that I had a depressing life. I was just, I think there was like sometimes empathy is an affliction, but costs you something, like when you're around suffering and loss, you take it personally, even though sometimes it doesn't have anything to do with you. And that's the way I was when I was a kid. I was just a sponge. And then coming in contact with art that was so sad made me feel accepted in some way. Like I felt like I was asked to be on that team. I got picked for that T-ball team, and I was glad to be there, and gave me a way to express these kind of deep things I was feeling as a kid, and definitely throughout adulthood as well. So,
Yeah, empathy can be a very hard thing to deal with because, like, you feel so deeply and so tenderly every good or bad experience someone's going through that you end up having to, like, almost turn your heart to stone so that you don't take on more than necessary just out of your own mental well-being.
I feel like outwardly I've kind of taken on a certain character where I can be kind of standoffish too with people. And I had a friend say to me a couple of years ago, she was like, I thought you were an asshole for a while when I met you. And then I realized you were just actually really shy.
And you feel somehow,
Like you were just shy. You just don't talk to people you don't know. You walk up to the people you do know and where you feel comfortable. And she was like, I thought you kind of freaked me out. You seemed a little scary. And then she was like, and then I just realized you're actually a pretty sweet dude. You warm up to people in a different way. So, yeah. And I think that was my way of, I don't know if it's a way of avoiding, but, you start to really control what you'll let in, because when everything has a tendency to get stuck in your skin like a splinter, you kind of are a little choosier, and a lot of drama and a lot coming at you. You're just like, nah, I'm good.
Right.
Be over here.
Tread lightly.
Tinkering. How are you in my workshop instead?
On all these extra things. I don't have to worry about my own inner world.
There's so many hours in the day. It's the one thing you don't get back.
Cool. So you've kind of talked about this before, where do you find inspiration for your work? Are there specific movements or experiences that influence you?
Honestly, just anywhere. It's just kind of a free association with whatever's going on around me. I don't have a thing that I do to be inspired. I think I'll just have a conversation with a friend, and it's just like, it'll spark something, or I'll be sitting watching a movie, and, my house is tons of little piles and receipts, and I'll slowly gather those things up and keep about 1 out of 10 of them and start working on it, kind of thing. So yeah, I just find life the thing that's going to inspire all the time. And usually I get ideas are born out of some kind of almost frustration with me. Like if I get in a certain frame of mind, I will start cooking. And it's like, I feel like making stuff is almost like getting in a fight. You're scared of getting into a fight until you get in a fight. And then it's not that big a deal. It's just like, oh, your adrenaline jacks up. And that's kind of the way I approach a lot of art. Like it's just these moments spin off into their own thing. And then I'll just start making something from an experience or conversation. Not that it all comes from a hard place, but it's like I want to convey some kind of realism. So, yeah.
This next question is kind of two parts, but How would you best describe your unique style or approach to painting? And then I'll ask the other part about the answer.
I think I work very much in my own way, but I don't sit down and think of myself as an overly unique artist. I don't think I've created a technique or a way of doing things that no one else hasn't done before. But I also like that because a lot of what I do is very graphic or stylized. I used to want my paintings to look very lifeless and flat and very much like they were a big sticker that had just been stuck to the wall. And over the years, I've kind of softened to that approach and have kind of branched out a little bit. But technique wise, I don't really sit and try to be different. I think there are people that look at something I've done and they're like, you did that, because I think we each have our individual spin, but I don't really feel the need for my approach to be very singular because I just want to get the idea out. But then I think what I really pride myself in is the continuity between pieces, and you start to see the idea start to take shape. And I think everything we do really is autobiographical. So that's where you really become, where what you make starts to be indicative of you personally, because there's nothing under the sun that hasn't been done before, but it hasn't been done by you. And that's what's I find to be really important.
Nice. How would you best describe the type of artist you are?
I had a friend my friend Jen, who put it best. She's like, everything you make is Southern phantasmagoria. And I was like, I'll take that. I really had a hard time explaining what it was I did. But she was like, the music you make and the art, she was like, that's the way I would put it. And I've always been really grateful for her saying that. I was like, oh, that's what it is. I mean, it's a distillation of my own experience. And I was a kid who grew up at the bottom of the mountains and was surrounded by mystery. And I really feel like there are spirits in the woods. And I grew up in an extremely haunted house.
Really?
Yeah, just seeing people in the house and stuff like that, which is a long story for another time. I've always felt like the veil between life and death is very, very thin. And I have been around a lot of scary situations and lost a lot of people. And I think the work I make, it comes from that place, which is a strange, I don't know if Southern Gothic is the way to put it, but it's
Southern haunted.
yeah. And I really am haunted by experiences that I've had. And those have worked to fuel a lot of things I made over the year. I've got a lot of appreciation for that.
Wow.
Things that I would have seen as being kind of scary, I'm honestly really grateful for.
Yeah. I've actually never seen a ghost.
It's one of those things that once you see it and you realize that there's something that you had just never seen before, like everything's different after you do. I mean, I've definitely seen things where it's like, yeah, I can't deny it any longer.
What kind of ghosts have you seen?
When I was 14, we moved into a house, and I didn't realize that in Tennessee, if there's a property that is haunted, that by law you have to tell someone it's haunted. It's like on the books in Tennessee. And so my parents bought this old farmhouse when we were kids. I was 14 when we moved into it. The person he was selling. My parents were like, this is it. We can afford it. We love this. We see our kids growing up here, kind of thing. The guy was like, all right, well, I got to be honest. I'm trying to find time. Yeah. He's like, I have to tell you that my wife and I have seen things in this house. And my parents were like, oh, we don't worry about that at all, kind of thing. After living there for about 6 months, it started to kind of get going. And we started seeing people in our house, things moving and stuff like that. And so once you do see that, it's like, wow. Yeah. Okay. And I think that toughened me up to stuff like that. But also, I think as a kid, I kind of lived feeling like I was being watched. And also the threat of eternal damnation at all times, being raised like very religious. You kind of hit a breaking point where you just like, it's changed the physiological makeup of your being, you know? And I love the magic of being alive. And sometimes the scary stories are the best ones.
What is an example of a ghost you saw, or what?
Without going into huge detail, the first one I saw was there was this big closet upstairs in the house I grew up in. And my friend Patrick and he saw this girl at the same time I did. We were playing hide and seek or running around. We're a bunch of kids. We were playing. One of the kids was standing in the doorway to this big closet. And I saw this girl standing behind this kid, just plain as day. And I was looking at her, and I looked at my buddy Patrick, and he looked at me, and he just goes, "Who the hell is that?" And we ran past this kid into the closet. Of course, no one was there. And then I ended up seeing her like multiple times over the course of a couple of years. It was kind of like she was visiting.
What race was she? White?
She was a little white girl with red hair, and she was wearing a white dress.
So she looked not like a ghost as in white, but like as in looked like a person was actually there.
Yeah, but there was something off.
Like it was glowing, or
No, it just looked like someone was standing there, but that someone was not right.
were they happy?
She looked very blank. And then my brother saw her standing in the yard, and I had not talked to him about her. And he came in and he was like, I saw this girl standing in our yard. I was like, I've seen her too. And that was the beginning of seeing a lot of cool stuff to come. It was cool. Yeah. I mean, that's a long story. I mean, it was cool. It was an interesting house to grow up in. That's for sure.
I always thought, like, if I ever saw a ghost, I would criticize it for being a lowlife. Like, you do whatever you want. Why would you come around?
But can they? We don't understand the
restricted.
parameters they're working.
I mean,
you could be tied to a place, you know. Anyone who said they had ever seen an alien was written off as some kind of quack and mocked publicly. And now it's not that big a deal to talk about.
All the F-16 pilots were like, I saw them, but I didn't want to get fired.
And who's to say they're not the same thing? You know, I think there's just so much. We believe we're the top of the heap.
Or our senses can only...
Totally. I mean, I think human beings are easily overwhelmed.
Radio is a great example.
Yeah.
We can.
Totally. Yeah. And we see that as being some kind of archaic thing, but we've come so far as a race in such a short time. But it's like the fact that we think we're it. I've seen too many things that hint to another realm, like a very spiritual realm, to deny that I think any of that is true. But I'm not going to condescend to anyone and act like I've got answers. You know, it's like anyone who says they've got it figured out is definitely lying to your face. So
definitely. So how has your artistic style evolved over each of the mediums that you work with? There been like shifts or turning point?
Yeah. I mean, I think as I've gotten older, you know, you realize that you kind of go about things differently. Visual art, I wanted to make paintings super quick. I just wanted to get ideas out. And I worked very simply so that it was very simple and very graphic and just like huge color plane kind of stuff. Very pop art looking, because I just wanted to get the idea out and start something else. And now I kind of take more time and flesh it out a little more. And musically, I mean, I was playing just like really intense physical music for a lot of years. And on stage, I was like coming off with broken bones and bleeding. And I was like a really intense thing. And now what I'm doing is like, it's not by any stretch quiet music, but I come at it very differently, a little more reserved or a little more planning. Yeah, I had this kind of like need when I was younger to sort of turn myself inside out. And there was something about, I don't know if public suffering is like necessarily the thing, but I would get hurt. I would just do really wild stuff. I would just flip off stages and crack my kneecaps and come get off tour with all my ribs busted on one side and broken hands. And I was kind of a rowdy cuss, I wouldn't weird about fighting. And I thought that was just a very normal thing to do. And, you get older and you don't feel the need to act out as much. I like to come at things in a more thoughtful way. And I was very much fueled by the inhuman amounts I could drink and all the drugs I would do. And I would numb myself to a lot of things. And I feel like my personal arc when it comes to art and music has changed a lot because my life itself has changed so much. So the way I execute my own thoughts into some kind of medium is done in a little more reserved manner than it used to be.
Was this when you were playing drums in the punk band?
Yeah. And also once I wasn't behind a drum set, I could sing. I didn't have anything between, and I spent more time in the crowd than out of it kind of thing. And I've set myself on fire, I've done all kinds of, and it was very much like it was me working through what was happening with me internally. None of it was accidental. It was very much the way I felt. I just acted it out. And over the years, I've been fortunate to have a lot of people talk to me and express that resonated with them because they themselves also feel that way. I think that it's important for all of us to feel seen and but definitely the way I go about things is not that aggressive any longer.
What was the artist that would like throw his shit in the crowd?
Gigi Allen? Oh man.
Did you have some Gigi Allen moment?
I never met Gigi, but I played with the Murder Junkies quite a few times. And for a while, William Weber III and I were pals. I'd see him out on tour. He was a guitarist, and I didn't know Merle that well, but I hung out with him a few times, like Gigi's brother. And they're actually such, honestly, sweet dudes when you're with them one-on-one. But
when they put on the show.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of art is made to keep people from doing bad things too. I think they create art to buffer themselves from some pretty dangerous tendencies inside of them. Maybe not with everyone, but definitely with certain people. See that. So getting to know those guys was cool.
Yeah.
And hearing all the Gigi stories was from the guys that were his family and band, was interesting.
Wow. Man. So what would you say is some of the biggest challenges you faced in pursuing such a diverse artistic path?
I think it's just hard to be an artist, especially in this country, just finances. And I have done art my whole life and it's been peaks and valleys, but great art comes from this place, but America doesn't love its artists,
Get a real job.
I have friends all over the world and a lot of them are just like, we don't know how you do it. Like, what a thankless thing it is to make art in the States. Like, we say we're an artist and we get money from the government. They pay our bills so that we can make art. And you don't have that here. And I think a lot of art in America, definitely great art comes from hardship. But I think that's the hurdle, I mean, if you were free to just make things all the time and not feel impeded or held back by this weird invisible force, then
Probably create less art because it's like when something becomes legal, it's like, it's not.
that's a good point. Yeah.
Weed is
It's not quite as exciting. Yeah. I mean, I feel like America has always been the artistic mecca, but it's the happiest place to be an artist, And I mean, look at Nashville.
Look at Broadway.
When I moved here, years ago, everybody was here because you could pay $300 in rent. And now everybody's, getting a bedroom for like $1,500. It's like, what? That's insane. And that's not good, I think to go into any kind of politics, but the capitalist machine kind of does roll over good ideas. And it eats them and shits them out. That's kind of
it.
And so, it's kind of like a town like this that was a bunch of pirates running around for years, just being like off the wall weirdos, and just this, you could do anything in this town for so long. And now it's a bunch of real estate yaks and venture capitalists, and they move into a place cheap and destroy the thing that made it worth being here. So I think what has held me back is just
Surviving.
the survival. In recent years, I've been fortunate enough to have the time and I wouldn't say it's financial stability, but I've had a chance to work at it as a full-time job. And I really appreciate that. And it does make me realize that given the opportunity, most of us would make a lot of work if we weren't spread so thin. So I think that's been the biggest hurdle for me and for everyone I know. That's kind of it. If we weren't constantly trying to get over that wall, we would really be in a different zone creatively.
What would you say your strengths and weaknesses as an artist are?
I feel like I have a very defined sensibility that I work within, and I like that about myself. I have a very direct way of working, and that's a strength. And my weakness is definitely just my sometimes sheer lack of discipline. I wish I was more regimented, but I kind of fly by the seat of my pants. Like I said earlier, though, I've started to kind of turn a leaf there. But if I'd been more disciplined in preceding years, I messed up a lot of opportunities by either just not grabbing hold of them or being completely out of my mind, being a very bad financial bet for someone. And, I have a lot more appreciation for what I'm able to do now. And it's worth it to create rather than to kind of be so distracted. So maybe I'm turning over a new leaf where that's concerned. I definitely have in recent.
Probably gotten a lot out of your system.
Yeah. And I mean, when you work in any medium of art, like everything's material. You got a lot of good stories to tell. You figure out how to tell them.
Touch the void, and then you come back.
You stare into the abyss, and the abyss stares into you. It's a little give and take to all of that.
Yes, come back.
Yeah. So I think those are my strength and weakness. Is that
Nice. So how long have you been in Nashville now?
Think around 15 years. It's the longest I've lived anywhere, actually, outside of being like a child.
What initially brought you to Nashville?
Well, I left New York, and I was either going to move here or Austin. And because a lot of the people I played music with and New York. I was kind of the first of all my friends to leave New York. And I ended up coming back to Tennessee to be closer to family. And I have no regrets there. My family they're everything to me, you know. Like, greatest gift I've been given in this life. And I have a really wild, cool family. Bunch of bobcats.
Do they live here in Nashville, or where do they?
Some of them do. I have two brothers that live back in East Tennessee still, and my two sisters live here in town. And my brother spends quite a bit of time here, but he's also got a studio in Kentucky about 2 hours from here.
What would you say you've learned living in Nashville?
I think that Nashville has taught me to create work for myself. I think that Nashville is a town of a lot of broken dreams. And if you are creating something in the hopes of being rich or famous from it, you're surrounded by people that it has not worked out for in Nashville. So being here has really taught me to make something because it's something I would want to see rather than something I'd want to buy or sell. And in a town that really is driven by numbers in a lot of ways, kind of like we were talking about, there's quite a fringe to this place. That is something that I have learned here, is to do it for more personal reasons.
You know, you'll stand the test of time that way.
Yeah, I mean, we're all going to leave something behind. A lot of people see it or a lot of people don't see it. But
As long as you see it.
I think that really giving a shit about what you're making is important. I think I have a lot of appreciation for life that I didn't for most of my life. So I want to make something cool that I would want to come across as I was digging through the rubble of some prior civilization.
Right.
Because from the looks of this thing, this shit's going to burn itself down.
I'll not be here the next 20 years. So
maybe we're fortunate to see the end of the play. I know.
Maybe we're going to study anthropology several thousand years. You'll come across people. This was Nashville. This was once a community.
We are the cavemen.
Look at these primal, primitive people.
We are absolutely the cavemen. We were always meant to be.
It's like technology is sped up, but it's still the same creature.
That you can somehow wield so much power and somehow do so little with it. From what it's like, I feel like we're very misguided human beings. We are ignorant to the beauty that surrounds us. We just have to make more. And it's like, that's why I think back to being a kid and just being in the woods.
Yeah.
It's like, what a beautiful life that was. To just not have anything pulling at you.
Yeah.
You know, I don't remember really what it's like to just breathe and to just stare at a tree.
Right.
And just be quiet in myself.
Yeah.
I don't think we have that anymore. I know you get older and you lose that, but I don't think we as human beings have that.
Yeah.
I don't think it's like acceptable to be that way. It's seen as simplistic, but it's like, whoa. I'm definitely understanding why people move out to the woods and become Unabombers or Buddhists. And it's like, yeah.
Or the Nashville bomber who's like, when he destroyed the attention. And
if there was a Nashville bomber, you know,
his whole goal was not to hurt anybody, but to just destroy the cell tower.
I remember hearing that early in the morning. I thought there was a car wreck outside.
You heard this thing, like, please go away.
Well, I didn't hear that, but I heard the explosion. It sounded like there was a car wreck. And it happened at what, like 6:45 in the morning or something like that?
Christmas Day.
Christmas Day, yeah. And I heard that boom and I ran outside thinking there was a car wreck like right outside of my house. And I saw this weird smoke. It's like, whoa, something blew up from this crazy. Yeah. We live every grouping of generations say it, that we live in strange times, but we definitely
You never know how close someone
It's a
is to you.
wonderful show.
It is. So, how do you see the painting scene evolving here in Nashville?
There's just a lot more of it. When I moved to town, it was a much smaller scene, but it has been really cool to watch that grow and for galleries to pop up and for these art crawls to happen. And over the years, being able to know so many of the people that have spearheaded that, it really is a very honorable endeavor. And this town has grown in a very positive way around the art scene. There's always been a music scene. But for a long time, Nashville was kind of seen as a flyover town. People didn't tour. When they toured, they didn't stop in Nashville. And that's changed in recent years. And to see Nashville really appreciate its visual artists in a way, it hadn't gotten to where it necessarily needs to be, where there's more money in it and the government, the city itself recognizes. I'm not saying that doesn't happen. The city does offer a grants program and stuff like that. We're definitely not Europe or Canada yet, but to see Nashville grow into what it is now from where it was when I moved here is really cool to see. And to see people be recognized and be important in a very worthwhile endeavor is cool. So I think Nashville has grown in a lot of positive ways when it comes to visual art.
Nice. What do you believe the power of a painting is?
I mean, that's a hard thing to quantify. I think it's like smelling food cooking in another room. It's a thing that the way each person relates to it is different, and it can create a very strong desire in you to understand, or that's the way I think paintings kind of work. I think, like I said before, I very much see them as windows from a different place. You're just staring through a window or seeing a photograph that someone took. Their making that thing was very much an experience. And if it resonates with you, you are on some kind of similar wavelength that this person was. And there's a deep kind of spiritual communication in that. So
I'll never forget the first time I saw Francis Bacon. He's one of the most visceral artists that has moved me in ways I have never known I felt. Like the first time I saw 1944, oh my God.
there is something very animal and very violent those paintings. And he was such a conflicted, weird human being.
Oh my God.
You ever seen the photographs of his studio?
All destroyed and everything. That's how
You couldn't even walk through there.
yeah, he said he tried creating a more sterile environment.
In there out of his mind, just chugging 10 gallons of champagne and trash and everything, and getting beat up by his weird boxer boyfriend or something. And he dated with a boxer for a long time that just beat him up. And I mean, you see the work that guy made. It's like, that's what I'm saying. It's like, I mean, yeah, it's just, you are filtering your own experience at all times.
There's an incredible documentary on YouTube called A Brush with Violence. And it's about Francis Bacon.
I saw that. Yeah.
He's like,
really good.
He's like, he talks about how he wanted his boyfriend to beat the shit out of him and like how he would want his boyfriends to rape him. He was like, that's what I wanted for them to do, but they would, and I would get mad at them.
Yeah. I mean, there was a very intense, deep yearning in a person that has to kind of hurt themselves, or to create stuff. And I think I used to feel, when I was saying I used to really beat myself up, I do understand that, but I don't feel that anymore. It's, I feel fortunate to have experienced the life I've experienced, and now I can talk about it. And if Francis Bacon, he'd be old as dirt if he were still alive, but, it would be cool to have seen him come to a more peaceful place. And maybe what would he have to say then? Artists are very troubled, It's like, would Kurt Cobain be the same person that he was when he died at 27 kind of thing? Or would he have taken a softer approach and thought of things in a different way and not been so hard on himself, you know? It's like, as you get older, your experience and the way you read the bones changes, you know?
Yeah. I mean, Kurt Cobain was bipolar.
Mm-hmm.
He like dealt with, it's probably when he killed himself.
Yeah. Deep depression.
These depressions, no one to relate to. And he was like really intelligent. So it was like, he felt a lot of people couldn't understand him. Like he lost his virginity to someone talented.
And, you know, art is it's a way of seeing and being seen. I think that people deal with very deep isolation. And I think people that are very artistic, they definitely deal with it in much more on the nose fashion. Like a lot of artists, they're troubled, but there's a fascinating, beautiful thing to seeing someone essentially like crush that into a little diamond. And there's a lot of real shit art. There's no way around that. It's hard to be objective. There's a lot of crap, but there's also just some very electric.
People burying their soul.
Yeah. I mean, you are seeing the grinding internal spiritual gears of someone sometime, or you're seeing this thing that is like a puff of smoke and beautiful, like as we get to see both of those things exist sometimes in the same frame, you know, or in the same song. You know, it's really a beautiful thing. Like the internal struggle that happens.
One of the most harrowing pieces of art I've ever seen is this piece called "The Impossibility of Death in the Eyes of Someone Living," and it's by Damien Hirst.
Oh yeah.
The shark in the tank.
Yeah.
It scared the fuck out of me the first time I saw it because it was just like the shark is starting to age and it's starting to get like terrifying. And placed in the gallery, it looks like the shark was swimming through the room.
Well, there's no hungrier animal than life itself, you know? And so that piece alone to watch it still play out. You know, that shark is in there in formaldehyde, but even, you know, I've seen that same piece so many times, and to see it still in progress is a strange thing. Yeah. I mean,
and then it's getting wrinkles on it. Scary.
Yeah. But they say about us that in your casket, your hair and your fingernails never stop growing. There's something very intense about the beyond and what we miss when we're not here to see it anymore. You know, like time just keeps going. And
Have you've seen that in person?
oh, like someone's fingernails
The
or
impossibility of death in the eyes of someone. Damien Hirst.
Mhm.
You've seen the shark?
Yeah.
You've done the walk up to it?
Yeah. It's in a room by itself.
Good God, that's terrifying.
And it's like, it really is a strange thing. You know, a lot of people with Damien Hirst, they love him or hate him, but I think he's very much of his time. But I think that the statements that were being made with some of those pieces were statements worth making, especially on how commercial they were and the way that we read that stuff. There's a real tongue-in-cheek feeling to that. But when I saw that piece, I had a feeling, you know, it was like I was just in Berlin the end of last year and got to see the Nefertiti head for the first time, the head of Nefertiti. And it is in
the Egyptian.
Yes. And you want to talk about a talisman. Like sometimes you see something that feels very powerful, and seeing that Hearst the first time, there's something so strange and off-putting and electrical about it, you know. And I had the same feeling walking into that room, and there's that pedestal with a single light on the head of Nefertiti that you've seen in every art book that's ever existed. But to see it in person, there's something very quieting like humbling about seeing that thing. There's like a power in this object, you know? And I'm not saying it's full of magic, but is it not? You know, it's like
Damien was like, told some fishermen off the coast of Australia, I want you to find a shark that will eat you. And then had it sent to him, and then he filtered it was formaldehyde. And people said that wasn't
stuck it in the last
wasn't
box.
art. I was like, it definitely is art. When he cut the cow in half, he did that.
I've seen
chainsaw.
that too. That's such a strange.
I was like, that's definitely art.
Yeah.
I was like, animals die all the time.
That is one. That's another good thing about New York is I got to see all this
Just
stuff.
to walk between,
you know,
the
it's like
cow.
over the years, just with the museums there. I think Nashville is growing at the clip it's growing, but I will look forward to us having like museums here, like bigger. I mean, I love the Frist, but we don't have the Met yet.
Yeah, we don't have. Where did you see the Damien Hirst?
At the Met, at the Metropolitan.
And that's where the shark was.
Yeah, it was.
And
even though that's sealed, you can kind of smell it. So there's a weird kind of multi-sensory tactility to
it's kind of like greenish turquoise.
Oh yeah, there's as natural a thing as it is to see an animal. That's as unnatural as it gets. There's something pretty shocking and bizarre and terrifying and kind of sad. Was that animal being disrespected?
No.
Or was it being essentially like kind of put in a place where it could almost be worshipped?
Well, we put in a place where,
and it's like, yeah, I would understand someone seeing it either way. I don't think either are wrong. Two things can be true at the same time.
I think the possibility of seeing that in a room in the way that it is.
And quite literally the fish out of water.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so many different ways
to see that killer so exposed and dead.
What is some advice you'd give to someone who's interested in exploring the diverse artistic mediums?
I think just you can go multiple routes. You can go to school and study somewhere, or you can just start working. And I think either way, find out how to start creating the things you're thinking, whether it's music or art, with whatever you can get your hands on, and just be making work. And, you know, I heard that a lot as I was younger, and really now know that to be true. It's don't wait for inspiration or to think there's something keeping you from doing it. It's like, if you find a way to consistently work, the path kind of creates itself. And that really is true. I feel like it's almost a cheesy thing to say because it's expected, but I have found that is absolutely true. Just no matter what you choose to work in, just start working and people start to see it. It'll resonate with someone and you just start to meet more people. I mean, it's how we met, was through people.
Yeah.
Who we both found interest in they were doing, and we're all tied together in that way.
Definitely, I would say this artistic scene definitely perpetuates itself.
Mm-hmm. The whole 6 degrees thing, that's not even true. It didn't take 6 degrees, you know, with most folks.
Maybe you wanted.
Yeah.
So how do you go about like monetizing your art? How do you know what to price it at? How do you?
That's actually something I have not been the best at, because I've been conflicted about making money from art, you know, but I've also made money from art, and I have had to soften over time because I want to make money with the art so that I can continue to create the art and to work on things without being pulled in multiple directions and have multiple jobs and stuff. It's like, okay, well, that thing has to start generating money. And it's been way up and way down. I've had really successful periods, but the thing I've always struggled with is how to ask for money. I don't have like a tried and true method of that. I've started to kind of think about how much time and effort I put into it, or how expensive it was to make a thing. But I kind of fly by the seat of my pants a little bit, and I just if a number comes to my mind, it's like, do I, on a spiritual level, think that's true, that it's worth that? If it is, then that's what it becomes. I'd like to get better at I'd like to be good at the business aspect in a way that I haven't. I've enjoyed making things. And over time, I've sold a lot of stuff, but I could have been more aggressive in getting stuff out and making it a business, which I am starting to focus on that more now.
When you sell your art, is it generally in a gallery, or is it one-to-one, or how do you?
It's both. I've had gallery shows, but to be honest, like, as shitty as I am at the internet, I've never been really great at putting myself out in a digital way. I have been very fortunate to have the old school word of mouth thing happen. And for a long time, there's a group of people that if I make something, a lot of times somebody will buy it,
Yeah.
But I've also been historically gone through periods where I won't work for a long period of time too. I would make enough money and then I'll vamoose out for a while, and that was usually when I was like drinking a lot, doing a lot of drugs kind of thing. And now that I'm kind of more present all the time, it's like, okay, yeah, this is something I very much respect and I do want to make money off of it, not because I have the desire to be rich or anything, but I want to perpetuate the ability to make these things. And it's important enough to me to keep doing it. And then it should be important enough to me to be able to let go of things too. Because I'll go through periods where I'll hoard work and not show anyone. I live in a house that's just full of artwork, that no one has seen yet. And now I've got a studio full because I've got a show coming up. So it's just like, I need to get rid of a lot of stuff.
Where's your show going to be?
It's at the Browsing Room Gallery downtown, May 10th. And that is at Downtown Presbyterian Church where those studios are that I have. There's a gallery there. And so I also have a music project that we just went down and made our first record in Austin. It's not out yet, but it is a killer record. And I'm really excited to be playing with the guys I'm playing with. And we're also going to be playing in that really beautiful domed chapel at the church. I don't know if you've been in that building, but it's a historical, like really beautiful building. And the back of the building is slated to be demolished. And I look forward to playing in that room before it goes away. The big sanctuary, which is it was built in an Egyptian revival style, it's staying, but the back building has this really beautiful chapel in it. We're going to play music there.
This is the same Presbyterian church.
Yeah, on May 10th. So I'll have the art opening with all my paintings, and we're going to be playing music as well.
It's awesome. Where's the church?
It's on Representative Lewis Way and Church Street. Yeah.
Do you know your album?
Not yet. I have a couple different titles I'm batting around. And the main tracking of the record is done, but I have to go in and do some production kind of note stuff before stuff's going to start coming out. So I've got another trip down to Texas to do, to hang out in the studio there, which is with my really good friend, Will Sark. He has a studio down there called Western Wind, and it's out in the hill country. It is a beautiful place to make a record. And this record is pretty epic and lonesome. And it's like, whoa, sounds like I was recorded out in Texas, out in the hills. That's really beautiful down there. I love it. He's great guy. Been a really close friend to me for a long time. So I'm looking forward to getting that out.
What kind of genre?
Some people would say it's kind of Western music. There is something very film score to it. I really love like Ennio Morricone, people who essentially scored film. They're written in a strange kind of pop song format. They're not pop at all, but like X amount of minutes goes through these variations. But there's something very score-like to the way they were arranged and played out. And that group is called Good Country Dark. I'm really excited. I'm playing with a really amazing group of guys. Christopher Lord Bird, Jordan Hampton, Casey Strength, and Tyler Coppage are the guys I'm playing with. And they are all just pretty phenomenal.
All here in Nashville?
Yeah, they're all here.
What's the lineup?
I sing and play guitar. Chris Bird plays synth. Casey Strength is the lead guitarist. Jordan Hampton is the bass player, and Tyler Coppage is the drummer. We also kind of have there's a weird instrumental exchange thing. I play a lot of weird instruments that I've either built or older, kind of a lot of theremin and stuff like that. So it's pretty, I really love what we're making.
I love to hear synth in a Western style band.
Yeah, I love marrying what would seem like two different time periods. I've been in, especially singing. I've been screaming and it's been super fast, and I've got a pretty good range, and so it's just me hitting like almost like Judas Priest kind of stuff. And now this group I really enjoy just singing, and it's kind of croony, but I really do. It touches on a lot of things I grew up listening to. And my friend dubbed it, Jennifer Gagliardi, she dubbed it Southern Phantasmagoria. She said that about this
band.
Yeah,
Nice.
She was like, that's what I would say it is. Because I don't know. I don't know what it is. I have grown up listening to a lot of rock and roll, and I'm not trying to be pretentious, but it's not exactly country, and it's not exactly just a rock band. I think the Americana trope gets kind of overused, so it's like
thematic.
Kind of is what it is. But I'm really excited to start getting that stuff out.
Nice. So, and it's called Good Country Dark. It's the name of the band.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, that was a phrase everybody said where I'm from. Like if you went to town and you spent too much time in a city, they'd be like, I got to get out there. It's Good Country Dark, where it's actually dark and quiet at night. And also when you were up to something really bad, they would say it was your Good Country Dark, getting to you, doing nefarious deeds out in isolation. So that phrase had a couple different meanings growing up. I always found it really fascinating.
Nice. So you've done a lot of extensive touring. What would you say is some advice you'd give to someone who's about to go on a long tour or bound tour?
I mean, it depends on the budget you're working with. I've been fortunate to do some tours that had a pretty good budget, but a lot of the touring I've done is kind of punk band kind of stuff, especially when I was younger. And I would say if you're gonna rough it and do really crazy tours, it's like be careful who you trust, watch your shit, watch your back, stick close to people save your money. I found myself in some pretty dangerous situations because a lot of the bands I were in kind of had an almost violent air around them, and so
Attractive.
Get into some pretty sticky situations. And so I mean, it just depends. Like work with people you trust, be careful, don't get hooked on a bunch of touring is hard. So it's really easy to start drinking too much and doing drugs. And it's like, that kind of comes par for the course, comes with the territory. You deal with a lot of loneliness when you're out on the road and you're away from people you care about. So I think touring extensively like toughens you up. That's for sure. And when I was younger, I would do really long runs, and I'd come back just made out of wood. So it's fun, But I don't want to. I'm looking forward to getting back out on the road with this band. But I definitely want to do it differently than I did with some other bands, because I was a rowdy cuss for a lot of years, and I got into a lot of trouble while I was on the road too. Just being crazy, just being in towns I didn't know and ending up in places I shouldn't have. I got a lot of good stories.
Did you was all the touring you did, was it mostly like breaking even or the profitable tour?
Yeah, I mean, I went through periods where I did really well, and
With the punk
was
band?
that band toured all the time and made pretty good money, and that was my life for a lot of years. And then as you get older, it's like bands can be hard because it's if one person is off, it can throw everything into flux. And I've been in bands that were it was hard to find success when some people were really strung out and there was a lot of really tough shit going on. So I learned a lot over the years, and it was a lot of fun. And just like everything else in my artistic life, I've gone through periods where I've made good money, and I've also gone through the desert.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is the advice you give to someone dealing with like different personalities in the band and like egos and like trying to stay grounded?
I think the 10-second rule is pretty important. I'm pretty fiery, and I'll fire back at someone if they say something I don't like. And I've kind of learned to be a little more patient and to wait. It's like, give yourself 10 seconds before you respond. Because there really is, especially in musical groups, like there are a lot of egos involved, whether people want to say it or not. I've been in bands with just really unbelievable musicians. Been fortunate to play with some really great people, but with that comes a pretty fiery palette to work with. You got people that know they're really good, and there can be a lot of attitudes. And you throw on top of that financial strains where you are balancing a lot of, you're keeping all the balls in the air, and people are wild and drinking in different towns all the time. And it's sometimes you don't know what you're going to get. So
Probably like,
be patient with each other and be completely honest and transparent. Talk about everything.
it's like a marriage.
Totally. Being in bands is you are in a relationship, and they follow the same kind of story arc as a lot of romantic relationships do. There's definitely the new relationship energy period, and then there's the plateau, and then there's the fallout, the divorce kind of thing. It's like, that's how bands work a lot of times. Unless you are an artist who has the money to really financially compensate everyone you're playing with, and then they're hired guns, and there's that whole spectrum, of especially in Nashville, you see that there are bands that are in it together, making it happen together and sharing the weight of getting this thing off the ground. And then there are people that just like, they have enough money to just pay people off. Yeah. And so that they just don't have to deal with that. And I am not in that place right now, where I can afford to pay people what they're actually worth. I try to do what I can and definitely share when things are going well, but also when things aren't, trying to make it worth people's while. But I have really loved all the people I've played with. And there's some people I probably won't talk to again, but I still love them, and then there are people that just feel like my right arm. Like, I love them so much, I don't know what I'd do without them. Even people I'm not playing music with at this time. I got a lot of stories, a lot of appreciation for the weird kind of rogues gallery of strange people I've gotten to make shit with over the years.
When you said you were in punk bands, what kind of punk? I feel like punk is a very big.
Yeah, that's such a fragmented way of looking at it. I mean, punk's kind of all over the place. It's like, the bands I toured with the most kind of fell into almost the horror punk genre. So yeah, it was a little darker, a little more like we weren't so much like that, but we toured with a lot of those bands. But, at its heart, we were just a really killer rock and roll band. And then I kind of traveled in more of like not the 80s glam, but the kind of glam circuit. People that look back on like David Bowie, but shit was really wild and very substance driven for a lot of years too. And so, yeah, I mean, to say it was punk bands, I don't know. It was rock bands.
Are any of those bands still operating?
Most aren't. A lot of stuff imploded over the years. I was in a band for a lot of years here in town called Slick. It was a killer band, but there's nothing online. It was all pulled off, and can't go back and listen to that band as there was just a lot of falling out. But I had a great time with those guys, and I've learned a lot from the different bands I've been in.
You kind of answered this earlier, but what would you say is one of the biggest challenges you face as an artist, and how did you get through it?
I think the biggest challenge to me was, I don't know if when the camera cut this off, but financial stuff. Like, to be able to fund your art is the biggest hurdle I've run into. To be able to relax enough to feel the freedom to make stuff kind of unencumbered by the strain of paying bills. And the US is a tough place to be an artist. It just is. We're not getting the same government grants as you do in Europe and Canada. So it's pretty thankless in the US. And I think that's been the thing. Like I've said, it's been peaks and valleys, and I've gone through periods where I've done really well over the years, and then periods where I was not making enough work or took financial hits. And so that is the thing that has always been the common issue I will run into, is just being in the right mind frame to make what I want to make. And a lot of it is financial stress. I think that's what we all deal with. You look at Nashville as it becomes so much more expensive to be here. This town is not as conducive to making art as it was at one point. And to do it in this place, you really got to hoof it, in a way that I feel like in kind of recent years, you almost didn't quite have to do. The overhead now it's expensive to be here.
You got to be serious.
Yeah. And in some ways, it's taken some of the fun out of it. But like we were saying, like, good art does come from adversity too. And that strain can really be used as fuel. Like, frustration is a great motivator,
Definitely.
But that's the thing I've run into the most. It's just having the freedom to make stuff.
Not like confidence as an artist, or like self-esteem or insecurity.
I mean, internal struggle is definitely something everybody deals with. I think to some extent, people that are making art are they're very tender people in a lot of ways, and
Be gentle.
you can be bruised, if things do or don't go well. And the kind of fraud syndrome we all get into, where we feel like fakes for making what we're making. I mean, that's a stereotype for a reason. That's something I think we all as creative people are going to deal with for sure. So yeah, that's the kind of spiritual thing you run into. But I do know that when I feel comfortable and I'm not worried about finances, or I make work and I feel free to make work. I don't know that I used to be that way. I worked better under pressure, but now I like being able to not be freaked out while I'm trying to do something that I see as worthwhile.
It gives you that momentum. It's going well.
Yeah.
You can put extra money in.
Either way can gas you up.
Yeah.
But
Depends how you transfer the energy you got.
mhm.
So from last year to this year, what was your biggest personal growth?
I in the last year have really learned a lot more about self-respect. I know that my abilities are intact and I'm able to do some really cool shit. I like what I make and I like what my friends are making and I am in a good place. But to be able to respect myself in a way that didn't feel somehow goofy to me, like there was something about being proud of myself that felt strange to me. We're not taught to pat ourselves on the back and say good job to ourselves. And I've kind of learned to do that over the course of this last year. I found myself like really appreciating myself for who I am and what I know I can do. So, yeah, this last year's been really formative for that for me.
Coming into your own,
Yeah. Yeah.
accepting yourself.
And there are a lot of things I'm doing now that I wish I was doing years ago. But at the same time, things happen when they happen.
We're gonna have the appreciation here.
Yeah, and for a lot of my life, had things been easy and gone really well, I would have used that thing to kill myself. And so I am not there. And now when things happen, I deeply appreciate them.
Yeah.
And I feel a real debt of gratitude to the people that make that possible and also to myself and to the God of my understanding. I feel like there's a pretty intense force that is pushing all of us. And I feel a lot of gratitude for the creative spirit I do have.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So how can people support you as an artist?
I think support comes in a lot of different packages. I think just people showing interest in what I do has meant a lot. And then there's the financial side, which I am starting to set things up. I've got a show, paying show, May 10th, like I said, at the Browsing Room. And we'll have a record out hopefully by the end of the year. And so I think it's important that we all like support each other by buying what each other's making. But I think on a very spiritual level, I have gotten a lot of support from my friends who are also makers. And I think all of us kind of talking about each other's art is pretty important. And that's a good way to support someone. I forget, I feel like in Nashville, we kind of forget how amazing our friends are. We take for granted what people are able to do. And a lot of times we don't go to our friends' shows and because they're our buddies. But I mean, there's some really amazing people here. I met you through Lindsay Davis, and she's been kicking ass for a long time and is really a wonderful artist, a powerhouse. She is very much an individual. She is herself and she is creating work and she's living off that work and she's introducing people. And I think that's a really important thing. And I myself I went through a lot of hard years after breaking my back and being really screwed up for a lot of years where I kind of was not in the scene of people, whether it's visual art or music. And as I've gotten back into it, it's like, yeah, I could be better at supporting my friends and just talking about how absolutely amazing all my friends are and what they make. And I've started to make a point to push people's art that I enjoy myself, especially people that I know. I think it's important. So I think support comes in many masks. And yeah, there are a lot of ways to help each other out.
Yeah. Especially here in the art community, everyone wants to feel seen. That's like one of the biggest currencies you can give. So make them feel like they're being appreciated. Their art is actually making a difference in people's lives.
You can make money off your art, but there's also the spiritual currency of realizing that what you're making means something to people.
Yeah.
And that in itself that's the wind beneath your wings, baby, you know? I've had people say things to me that I didn't expect to hear, and it meant so much. It was kind of a humbling thing that I made something that actually meant something to someone in that specific moment they were in. I feel like we doubt ourselves and what we're making all the time, but if you think it's cool, someone else also thinks it's cool. Just make it. Do your best to let people see it, and it'll resonate with someone. We're all somehow connected to each other. There's a lot of shit going on that you might not be into, but there's also a lot going on that you will. We both know a lot of people making cool work in many different disciplines.
Yeah. I think you were talking about earlier, like how all of our friends make stuff, and because they're your friends, you might not go see their stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like we have the luxury of being here in Nashville, where everyone's an artist, and like I don't want to say jaded because that's kind of a negative term, but we're so inundated that everyone's an artist.
Yeah.
Like, oh, well, there'll be another one. I'll go to that.
Well, like we were saying, I think making art is kind of like doing magic tricks. You take for granted that you can go out and look at these magic things happen, because I get it. There's so many times I'd rather just stay home and chill or work on my own stuff. But I do in the last year or two, I've started to get out, be part of a thing that I kind of was lost to for a lot of years because of the accident I had. And it really amazes me what my friends are capable of. They are some pretty astounding, weird, cool people, you know, do really amazing work.
And the more that you can show up for other people and be obsessed with their work, that same energy will come back to you in your work.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully, if I am a believer in karma bucks, you know. But I think that for a long time I didn't feel so much joy in making work like I feel now. Like I do have a lot of joy, and I think that energy really does start to create around you what you hope to see. And I am kind of at a point in my life where I was taken out of everything for quite a few years, and I was pretty alone and couldn't make stuff, and really dealt with my body being completely shattered and being held up from that for a lot of years. And the better part of the last 10 years of my life has been that. And I'm so glad I went through that. You know, that taught me more than anything else in my entire life has. And now I feel a lot of joy in the ability to create, and that people would be interested in that brings me a lot of happiness. And it's a very humbling thing to know that people give a shit.
Yeah. Going through your body, we can imagine the appreciation we have for simple things like brushing your teeth.
Everything means something. Yeah. Yeah. I had to relearn how to do a lot of them. I got snapped in half, you know, and it has been a wildly painful and enlightening journey to kind of come back to myself. And like I said, I wouldn't trade it, but I don't necessarily want to do it again.
So how about now? How do you like to consume media? You said you love to watch movies. Do you have favorite books, movies?
You know, I felt a lot of guilt over how much time I've spent watching movies and TV and stuff. But then I think about it, and it's like everything I've made was informed by that. If I had my druthers, I definitely would not be on my phone so much. Those things kind of tractor beam of just the rabbit hole, and everyone's life looks so perfect. Yeah, and also just like, where does it end? Like, I like to research things, and so before I know it, I've been staring at that thing and gone down rabbit hole after rabbit hole, and I have no clue what I was doing in the first place, what I was looking for. So, I mean, the way I really love and learn from is to like actually sit down and physically put a record on and appreciate it as this precious object, and to sit down and watch a film in its entirety. I mean, that's like what I love, to be able to take something in without distraction, That's getting harder and harder to do. Yeah, yeah. I don't get swept up in someone's creation as much as I used to because there's too much to choose from. Like we're too lucky when you have it all. What's actually going to hold meaning to you now? And I think that we're suffering from the immediacy of being able to have these priceless objects. And we're taking in 15 seconds of someone's work and then moving on. It's kind of tough. It's like we're easily distracted.
What are some of your favorite movies?
Wow. I really got into the Kurosawa films. Yeah, and then what, as a kid, I loved spaghetti Western. And there was something about those scores, like those Morricone scores. Like when I was a kid, I was just like so much passion and mystery in that music. But then working backwards, kind of like you do with records, like got me in. And once the Criterion collection was a thing, and actually seeing films that meant something to filmmakers and what inspired them, that's been really cool. But I'll also just sit down and watch some real garbage and love it.
Right.
I love some lowbrow bullshit. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. That's a hard question to answer. Like kind of like, what's your favorite record? It's like there's so much to choose from, and just like, but I can look back at films that really pushed me in different directions. Like
some of your paintings and stuff, I could definitely see Quentin Tarantino, like Pulp Fiction. I was like, wow, this guy, I think.
Yeah, very much. And I loved a lot of the kind of like drive-in movie action film stuff too that led to his stuff. Like I love the really kitschy, like,
Die Hard.
Yeah. Or, and a lot of kung fu movies and blaxploitation films. I mean, everything was made. The Russ Myers kind of soft core stuff. I mean, that real like people making shit just because they wanted to make it. And I think music and film is so amazing in that way because there are people there aren't people talking about Kenneth Anger stuff, his films in the same way they would, but someone who was more palatable socially, but just there's been so much amazing stuff that's worth seeking out. So yeah, that's a tangent we can go down.
Yeah, when I say like movies, I guess just movies you like or like books you like. Do you have favorite books you like?
Yeah, I mean, as a kid, I was really into, the Tolkien stuff, but then I really got into a lot of sci-fi stuff. Robert Heinlein. I remember reading Stranger in a Strange Land, and that really being a book that stuck with me. And we're kind of living in a time where it's like, did those authors steer human history? Did they write those things and we became those things, or were they seeing the future and warning us against some pretty dangerous moves we've made? And it's like, who knows?
That's interesting. I've never heard it as the steering.
Yeah.
I've definitely heard it.
Either way, I think these authors were the soothsayers and wizards of their time because all of that shit has come true.
What about like on YouTube? Do you have favorite stuff you like to watch?
I mean, I'm probably like you. I'll sit and watch a bunch of drum videos and be a total nerd for that stuff. But yeah, I'm nuts about documentaries, and you can get on YouTube, and it really is one of the greatest like assets we have. You can educate yourself using that.
YouTube University.
Oh, totally. How I learned to work on my car and teach myself to do things I didn't. I started watching videos on how to play guitar when I had a shattered back. And you can teach yourself to do anything if you sit down and seek out that information. And that is such a tool. And as everything has been monetized, it is amazing that there is that thing that is still free. So
2004 was a great year.
yeah, absolutely.
I'll never forget when YouTube came out. Like, go on my computer and watch like Queen, like Another One Bites the Dust. And I had this whole digital recorder and record it. And then when I go to school, I would listen to it.
Yeah, same. I remember there were so many bands like Sparks. I don't know if you've gotten into Sparks. It's the Mail brothers, Russell and Ronald Mail. They've had a resurgence, but when I was a kid, I really got into Sparks and thought they were just like this wild band. And they would put out records that were 5 years ahead of everything. Like they essentially society and the arts kind of were constantly catching up with them. And YouTube, I could show my friends live videos of Sparks playing and stuff like that. I was like, I never thought I'd ever see this. Like, I didn't know this existed. And that just started this rabbit hole I've been in forever. I'm just constant researching and going backwards from everything I love to go backwards to see where they got it from. And definitely collecting records my whole life. It's been a way of doing that too. It's it's a great tool for a nerd to have, It's can find out whatever you want to find out.
Anything we'd like to add?
I don't know. I feel like we've covered a lot of bases, I mean, I've really enjoyed sitting and talking. I guess I don't know when this will come out, but I got that painting show on May 10th downtown at the Browsing Room Gallery. And I'll be doing a lot of live music in the coming months, and I'd appreciate anybody coming and checking that out. And I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. I've had an absolute blast hanging with you.
Yeah, it's been nice.
Yeah.
I've got one last question.
Yeah.
What is something absurd you love or do?
Oh man, I don't know. My life is pretty absurd in a lot of ways. I don't know if there's any hobby I have that I find absurd, but I think making art in this social climate is an absurd act in itself. So anyone who feels so led, I think it's a pretty honorable thing to be doing, because it's getting harder and harder to do. And so I think just living in itself is kind of an absurd act. But I'm glad to be here and able to do what I'm doing. So yeah.
Well, awesome. Thank you, PJ, for coming over.
Thank you so much, Jordan.
Taking the time and
It's great being with you.
answer all these questions.
Yeah, I had a great time.
Awesome.
Let's do it again.
If you enjoyed this podcast episode, be sure to like, subscribe, and follow the podcast on all streaming platforms. And if you really like this episode, be sure to share it with a family member, friend, or someone you know who could benefit from the lessons learned in this episode. I look forward to sharing more of these wonderful artists with you. Thank you for joining me on this incredible journey. Until next time, bye-bye.